The first missile screamed past the cockpit like a warning sent by fate itself, close enough to rattle the glass and steal the breath from Captain Maya Hale's lungs. Below her, the jungle valley exploded into chaos, green torn apart by fire, smoke, and the staccato flashes of gunfire. 250 paratroopers were pinned down in a killing bowl, their radio calls breaking apart with panic and static. Command crackled into her headset, sharp and absolute. Black Hawk 3-1, you are cleared to abort. Repeat, abort the mission. Maya stared at the valley and tightened her grip on the controls. Turning back would be easy. Turning back would be safe. She didn't. Maya hadn't always been this unshakable. She remembered the early days, standing on the flight line while some pilots joked that Black Hawks were no place for a woman, that courage was measured by muscle and not resolve. She learned to let the comments slide off her, burying herself in checklists, night hours, emergency drills. Flying wasn't about proving anything to anyone, it was about the people depending on you when everything went wrong. And now, everything had gone wrong for the paratroopers below. The ambush had been brutal and sudden. What was meant to be a routine insertion turned into a nightmare when hidden positions erupted from the tree line. The paratroopers scattered for cover, pinned by overlapping fields of fire. Medics worked frantically in the dirt, hands slick with blood, while squad leaders tried to hold their lines together. Their voices on the radio were steady, but Maya could hear what they weren't saying, the fear, the exhaustion, the quiet acceptance that help might not come in time. Maya's co-pilot, Lieutenant Ross, glanced at her. His jaw was tight, eyes flicking between the instruments and the rising smoke ahead. They're throwing everything they have at that valley, he said. We've got multiple heat signatures. If we go in, we're flying into hell. Maya nodded. She knew the odds. She also knew what it meant to leave soldiers behind. Then we fly smart, she replied. And we don't leave them. She pushed the Black Hawk lower, skimming the treetops to stay below radar, using the folds of the terrain as cover. The helicopter shuddered as rounds snapped through the air around them, the sound sharp and personal, like the sky itself was angry. Warning lights blinked. A vibration rippled through the frame as a near miss rocked the tail. Ross called out damage reports, his voice calm but urgent. Maya listened, processed, adjusted, muscle memory taking over where fear tried to creep in. Down below, Sergeant Luis Moreno pressed his helmet into the mud as another explosion threw dirt into the air. He had lost 2 men already. More were wounded, bleeding through field dressings that were never meant to last this long. When he heard the distant thump of rotors, his first thought was disbelief. No one flew into this kind of fire. Then the sound grew louder, unmistakable, and hope surged through his chest like a second heartbeat. Bird inbound, he shouted. Hold on, they're coming. The enemy saw it too. Tracers arced up toward the Black Hawk, streaks of red cutting through the smoke. Maya banked hard, pushing the aircraft to its limits, using sudden changes in altitude and direction to throw off their aim. The world narrowed to angles, speed, and timing. Every instinct screamed to pull away, to climb out of range, but she forced herself to stay low, to stay committed. As the landing zone came into view, it looked impossible, too hot, too small, too dangerous. Flames licked at the edges of the clearing. Bodies lay scattered, some moving, some terrifyingly still. Maya's heart clenched, but her hands never wavered. She flared the helicopter, bringing it down in a controlled descent as bullets struck the fuselage with metallic thuds. The crew chief slid the door open, returning fire, shouting for the wounded to move. Paratroopers sprinted for the aircraft, half carrying their injured, faces smeared with sweat and ash. A young private stumbled, dragging a wounded friend, eyes wide with panic. Maya held the bird steady, fighting the urge to lift too soon. Every second on the ground felt like an eternity. The Black Hawk groaned under the weight of damage and desperation, but it held. A rocket streaked past, detonating close enough to knock the helicopter sideways. Alarms wailed. Ross shouted over the noise, "Engine 2 is spiking. We have to go, now." Maya looked at the last group of soldiers running toward them. One more moment, one more chance. She kept them down until the final paratrooper leapt inside and the crew chief slammed the door. She pulled collective and the Black Hawk clawed into the air, straining, wounded, but alive. Enemy fire chased them skyward, but the jungle fell away beneath them as Maya pushed the aircraft forward, flying on instinct and sheer will. Only when the valley disappeared behind them did she allow herself a breath. Inside the cabin, the paratroopers slumped against the walls, some laughing in disbelief, others crying quietly, gripping each other like anchors to reality. Medics moved through the chaos, tending wounds with renewed urgency and hope. Sergeant Moreno caught Maya's eye through the cockpit window and gave a small, exhausted nod. It was enough. They limped back to base on one engine, the Black Hawk scarred and smoking, but still flying. When they touched down, the rotors wound down and silence fell, heavy and profound. Maya climbed out of the cockpit, legs shaking now that the adrenaline was gone. She was met not with cheers, but with something deeper, soldiers standing a little straighter, eyes filled with gratitude and awe. Later, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in quiet colors, Maya sat alone on the flight line, helmet resting beside her. She thought about the choice she'd made in that moment when turning back would have been easier. Courage, she realized, wasn't the absence of fear. It was the decision that someone else's life mattered more than your own safety. The story of that day would spread, told and retold in mess halls and barracks, not as a tale of defiance, but of commitment. A reminder that leadership isn't about rank or recognition, it's about showing up when you're needed most, even when the cost is high. And for 250 paratroopers who walked away from an ambush that should have ended them, the steady hands of a Black Hawk pilot proved that sometimes, one person's refusal to turn back can change everything.